I rise in opposition to this special interest tax breaks for the rich, trickle-down economics bill that history shows doesn't work. I want to start by thanking Senator Wyden from Oregon, the leader on our side on the Finance Committee, who's done very good work, and Gideon Bragan in my office, who has been one of the tax reform experts in this body, and I want to thank both of them. This bill, Mr. President, should have been an opportunity for all of us to work together to put money in the pockets of working people. It's pretty simple. Instead of cutting taxes for the middle class, though, Washington chose to cut taxes for millionaires and corporations and pay for it by cutting Medicare and kicking people off their health insurance. It ought to be pretty simple. If we want to cut taxes, if you want to talk about cutting taxes for the middle class, if we want to cut taxes for the middle class, then let's pass a bill to cut taxes for the middle class. Instead of giving the money to corporations and the richest CEOs and relying on a bank shot, hoping it trickles down, cut out the middleman. That's what my colleagues claim to want. That's what the president said to us and to the country he wanted. But that's not what this bill does. This isn't a middle-class tax cut, not even close. According to the Tax Policy Center, 83%, you'll see Monopoly Man here, 83% of the benefits in this tax bill go to the by the end of the decade, go to the wealthiest 1% in this country. Imagine it, 83% of the benefits go to the richest 1% of people in this country. That's even worse than the Senate bill passed, which wasn't that great earlier this month. It was already pretty bad. 62% of the bill's benefits would have gone to the top 1% of households by the end of the decade. Apparently, 62% wasn't good enough for the Republican members of the conference committee. They thought that 83% of the benefits should go to the richest 1% in this country. So the bills actually got worse and worse and worse for middle-class families. How did the bill get this bad? Got this bad through massive permanent tax cuts for the wealthy, for so-called pass-through businesses and for corporations, which mostly benefit the richest people in this country. It got this bad through paltry tax cuts for some middle-class families that expire after a few years. Listen, Mr. President, you get this. The corporate tax cuts are permanent. They last forever. The tax cuts for individual, inadequate and modest as they are, expire after a few years. Gee, I wonder why they did that. Through a new way of calculating inflation called chain CPI, which will primarily hurt middle-class families. That doesn't even take into account the millions of Americans, and my colleague from Pennsylvania, who was part of that night, brought in the middle of the night, put a new provision in this bill that will cost 13 million Americans their health insurance. 13 million Americans will lose insurance under this bill. 13 million Americans. You know, I see all kinds of elected officials, all kinds of us in the House and Senate. We get insurance paid for by taxpayers, and my colleagues are willing to take insurance away from 13 million people, most of whom have jobs. They don't have jobs that pay what we make. They don't have health insurance like we have. They don't get pensions like we have. They're making $8, $10, $12 an hour, can't afford insurance. We're going to take insurance. We, as privileged elected officials, are going to take insurance away from 13 million people. And at the same time, Mr. President, it will raise insurance premiums 10%. Not 10% over time, 10% a year. If you're paying $500 a month in insurance now, you'll pay $550 next year. You'll pay more than $600 the following year. It didn't have to be this way. Our door as Democrats has always been open. Democrats, we represent half this country. Democrats wanted a seat at the table and wanted to help write a bill. Let me illustrate. A number of us in the Finance Committee, both parties, including my colleague from Ohio, Senator Portman, and Senator Toomey and others, Senator Wyden, were invited to the White House to meet with the president to talk about the tax reform bill. I presented the president two bills that I've been working on. One was the Patriot Corporation Act, which is pretty simple. It says if corporations do the right thing, if they pay good wages, if they provide good health insurance and pension benefits for their employees, and they keep their production in the United States of America, they get lower tax rates. The other bill, called the Working Families Relief Act, is also pretty simple. It puts money directly in the pockets of people making $25,000 and $50,000 and $75,000 a year. The President of the United States looked at me and said, I like the Patriot Corporation Act and I like the Working Families Tax Relief Act. After the hour-and-a-half meeting, this was witnessed by a dozen senators in both parties and a number of his cabinet officials, including Secretary Mnuchin, in the cabinet room at the White House. After it, I walked up to the president. I said, thank you for your interest. I handed him and his chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn, whom I'm proud to say is from Cleveland, I handed them copies of the bill. Then, Mr. President, something started to happen. Then the meetings started in Mitch McConnell's office. Now, for people that don't work here and live here and see this, I just would point out, Mr. President, down the hall, 100 feet, is Senator McConnell's office. Past the Ohio clock, my state, past the Ohio clock, 100 feet down the hall is Senator McConnell's office. Now, Senator McConnell, the meeting started in Senator McConnell's office. The President of the United States said he liked the idea of the Patriot Corporation Act, liked the idea of the Working Families Relief Act, but then he turned it over to Senator McConnell. And you know what happened down this hall? You know what happened? Wall Street lobbyist after Wall Street lobbyist walked in that door and out that door. Tobacco lobbyist after tobacco lobbyist walked in that door and out that door. Oil company lobbyist after oil company lobbyist walked in that door and out that door. Drug company lobbyists from all over the country walked in that door and out that door. And I walked in that door. They didn't literally carry bags of money out that door after they made their points and made their pitch, but they carried provisions in the tax bill that will make their employers bags of money. As I said, they didn't carry bags of money themselves. That would be uncouth. But they sure wrote provisions in this tax bill that provide bags of money for their companies, for the tobacco companies, for Wall Street, for the oil companies, for the drug companies, over and over and over, Mr. President. Republicans made it clear not that they would pass the Patriot Corporation Act, even though the president said he liked it, not to pass legislation like the Working Families Tax Relief Act, even though the president said they liked it. They made it clear they're benefiting one class of people, the wealthiest Americans, corporate CEOs, board members, and stockholders who see their profits rise and grow their businesses when they ship jobs overseas. You remember, Mr. President, we've talked many times here, as we've tried to end this tax loophole, that if you shut down production in Mansfield, Ohio, or you shut down production in Hamilton or Zanesville or Chillicothe or Lima, and you move it overseas, you get a tax break. They open a factory there and ship it back into the United States of America. You know what this bill did? It didn't close that loophole. It didn't fix that. It made it worse. It gave those companies, it greased the skids for those companies to shut down faster in Mansfield and Lima, in Chillicothe and Zanesville, in Portsmouth, Ohio, and move their production overseas. They get bigger bonuses. They make bigger profits. They get bigger stock dividends. Republican leaders somehow, they like to claim that somehow, and I heard this at the White House too, if you give a big corporate tax increase, if you cut corporate taxes like this bill does, about 40%, that they said $4,000 will end up in the pockets of every working man and woman in this country, that workers would get a $4,000 raise. Of course, nobody believed them, but that's what they said, that they would get a $4,000 raise. But you know why I know that's true? First, I know that's true because history shows anytime they get big tax cuts, anytime they bring dollars from overseas, the money doesn't go into employees' pockets. It doesn't usually go to create jobs. It goes to give more benefits to the executives. Their corporate pals. The other reason I know that that's not going to happen, that these dollars will not go to employees and not go to investing in more jobs, their corporate pals let the cat out of the bag and made clear they won't. CEOs from the largest corporations already on record, they state plainly, they're not raising wages. They aren't going to hire more workers. What are they going to do with this windfall? I know this will come as a shock, Mr. President. They're going to keep it for themselves. Imagine these CEOs that are in and out of Senator McConnell's office, the drug companies, Wall Street, tobacco companies, all the other oil companies. They're going to keep that, believe it or not, these corporations that are already, the CEOs, already making 8, 10, 12, some of them make $20 million a year. That's not enough for them, Mr. President. Why would that possibly be enough? What you got to have, if you're only making $20 million a year, you got to do something to juice it a little bit. So they would keep that money for themselves. They will do bigger bonuses. They will do stock buybacks. They will do dividends. Mr. President, in this charade, I've heard all this happy talk on the floor about how this is going to make Americans more competitive, and it's going to trickle down the middle class. If you want to do a middle class tax cut, darn it, do a middle-class tax cut. Don't bank shot it. Don't take out the middleman. Don't give it to corporations and say, please, oh, please, oh, please, give us a middle-class tax break. It never works that way, Mr. President. Republican leaders had a chance to work across the aisle. I heard Senator Toomey said Democrats didn't want to be involved. I heard Senator Cornyn say Democrats didn't want to be involved. I like those two gentlemen. I've worked particularly with Senator Cornyn on a number of things. We're working on a couple of issues right now. But they know that's not true. They sat in that White House meeting. They heard the President of the United States say to me and to Senator Casey and to Senator McCaskill and to Senator Stabenow and to Senator Wyden and to a couple others, they heard us offer reasonable proposals. The president was agreeable. Many of them were part of his campaign. Candidate Trump was saying a lot of these things in the campaign. But then, lo and behold, they said, Democrats don't want to be a part of this. Well, not exactly. We had a bill to expand the child tax credit. We had a plan to reward companies that create jobs here. All that, Mr. President, got jettisoned. All that got jettisoned down the hall in Senator McConnell's office. Down this hall in Senator McConnell's office, 100 feet away where these deals were cut. These deals with the drug company and oil company and tobacco companies and Wall Street lobbyists going in and out of his office, I didn't see all of them come out, but I'm guessing, Mr. President, they had really big smiles on their face. These massive cuts for corporations come at a heavy price for the middle class. We know when 1% gets richer and richer and richer, we know the middle class shrinks. These massive cuts come at a heavy price. This bill will explode the deficit. We know that. Even my colleagues who call themselves deficit hawks when there's a Democratic president, following the enforcer-in-chief, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, they call themselves deficit hawks when there's a Democratic president. All of a sudden they say, oh, we'll grow out of this deficit. Doesn't matter. We'll grow out of the deficit. Well, this bill, we know, explodes the deficit. We know what the plan is to deal with the deficit. You know what they do? They steal the money Americans have paid into Social Security and Medicare. How do we know that? I'm not just saying, as a progressive Democrat in this body, I'm not just saying, well, of course they're going to cut Social Security and Medicare. I think that, but you know why I'm sure of it? I always was pretty sure of it because that's what they do. But I'm sure of it because they said that. They made their plans crystal clear. Speaker Ryan says he wants to turn next year to what he calls entitlement reform. Now, retirement reform are retirement and health benefits people earn over a lifetime of work. You know what social insurance? Social insurance, you pay into Medicare over the course of your life. When you need Medicare when you're 65, you get this insurance. You pay into Social Security their entire life. You either get survivor's benefits for your children, or you get disability, or you get retirement when you reach the age of 66, more or less. You pay into unemployment insurance, and if you need it, God willing, you don't. But if you need it, you get help. That's what social insurance is. You pay for it, and you get help from society. It's society-wide social insurance. That's why it's called that. But Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady said the next stop for Republicans is to tackle entitlement. So here's what we know. This bill is going to cause huge deficits. We know that. They've acknowledged that. 2, 3, 4 years from now, Republican members will come to us. They'll, after the lobbyists have been down the hall with Senator McConnell's office, they'll come back and they'll say to us, we got this huge budget deficit. We're going to have to raise this eligibility age for Social Security maybe to 70. Some of them have talked about that. We're going to have to privatize Medicare because they say we got to make these programs stronger and sustainable. Nobody thinks they want to make them stronger. They want to cut them. That's how you save money, right? Even though you don't in the end. And here's what's aggravating about this. Think about all of us, a number of people in this body are past what society has designated as the retirement age 65. Number of members of this Congress, particularly in the Senate, are over 65. Most of us, we don't, I work in my garden, I work outside, I do things, but I'm not I'm not working in a diner. I'm not working construction. I don't use my arms and shoulders and brain and legs to do my work. We work here, and we work in jobs I'm privileged to have, and we get good compensation. We get good salary. We get good benefits. But we're going to tell a bunch of people who work with their hands and work with their brains and work with their bodies and work with their arms and shoulders, whose knees break down over time. We're going to tell the barber in Barberton. We're going to tell the truck driver in Evendale. We're going to tell the construction worker in Conneaut. We're going to tell the waitress in Warren. We're going to tell the nurse in Newark that they're going to have to work till they're 70. Sorry. Is that what we're going to do? So this tax cut, just follow it simply. This tax cut raises, it causes a huge budget deficit to give money to the wealthiest people in the country, creates a huge hole in the budget. And who's going to fill the hole in the budget? Not the lobbyists walking in and out of Senator McConnell's office 100 feet down the hall. They're not going to pay for it. They're not going to have to pay for it. It's going to be the nurse in Newark that has to work till she's 70. It's going to be the waitress in Warren that has to work till she's 70. It's going to be the carpenter in Conneaut, the construction worker in Conneaut. It's going to be the barber in Barberton and the truck driver in Evendale. Pass this bill. If we pass this bill, 83% of the benefits go to the top 1%. And this 83%, a lot of that blows a hole in the budget deficit. It's going to be paid for by working families. So cut out all the crap about this is something for working families. It is not. I'll say this for Republicans in Congress. They're making it pretty easy for the American people to see whose side are they on. You're either on the side of everyday working Americans who are working more hours than ever before and getting too little pay for their hours they're working. They're either working for them or they're working for the people in Senator McConnell's office down the hall. And I want my colleagues to just picture this. I want my colleagues to think about this picture, that this stream of lobbyists in and out of Senator McConnell's office, this stream of lobbyists from America's largest, richest corporations, the drug companies, the tobacco companies, the insurance companies, the companies that tend to run this government. I want you to think of that. I want you to think of, are you on the side of the workers who are doing the heavy work, who can't work till they're 70? Are you on the side of CEOs and politicians who do the bidding of these CEOs? It's a pretty clear case, Mr. President. It's a picture that is pretty obvious. Americans deserve better. We can do better for them by starting from scratch with one goal in mind. If we want a middle-class tax cut, Senator Hatch, if we want a middle-class tax cut, don't talk about a middle-class tax cut. Don't do trickle-down economics. If you want a middle-class tax cut, then darn it, give a middle-class tax cut. Give a tax cut to the middle class. It's pretty simple. I yield the floor.